Hello, my name is Mia, and I will be presenting on Indigenous food sovereignty in Peru. To begin, what drew me to this topic was my Latinx background. My mom's from Puerto Rico, and my dad's from Honduras, which made me interested to learn more about indigenous groups in Central and Latin America. Originally, I wanted to learn more about Taino food culture, but sources were very scarce, so I opted to go for Peru instead. I chose food as my topic since I really enjoy cooking and learning about other cultures through trying new foods. And Peru is a hotspot for a lot of different cultures, which intertwine different international foods like indigenous, Spanish, Chinese, and Japanese foods to create a unique blend. I wanted to focus on how indigenous groups and their agricultural practices helps them obtain food sovereignty and how it allows them to be more connected to the land, as well as how Western perspectives and influences affect indigenous communities, whether it be through globalization, capitalism, or climate change. So, first of all, I wanted to start off with what food sovereignty is, then why it's important for indigenous communities in Peru. Then I'll talk about how it's being affected, such as with capitalistic views, climate change, and how indigenous groups contrast this through their local markets, which promote community. Last, I'll explain how food sovereignty can help not only indigenous groups, but other non-indigenous groups as well. So, what is food sovereignty? Food sovereignty is described as the rights of peoples and communities to define, control, and manage food systems as it relates to the production of food, distribution, and consumption. And getting into my articles, my first one talks about the Kipu model as it relates to conducting decolonized research methodologies, which highlights traditional ecological knowledge and participatory action research. This helps in following indigenous ideas of knowing, being, and doing as part of their cosmos visions. And in this article, it highlights how collectiveness and community helps build and create deeper bonds with each other and the land, and they all help each other with agriculture and achieving food sovereignty. Aini, or reciprocity, explains how the Quechua people help one another through bartering systems, which highlights the ways they don't use capitalistic ideas of money and rather use trade to support one another. Duality and complementation are used to connect the men and women of indigenous Peru as the men plow the land and the women and men help plant the seeds, which shows an equilibrium between the genders. And solidarity is used to help the elderly as community members help gather food, which they no longer can due to their age. The researcher explains how through indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous groups are able to pass down their knowledge and connect themselves to their land and their Pachamama, or Mother Earth, as a way to fulfill their ancestral responsibilities. My second article explains how the Andean community of nations enacts regional policies in Peru and how indigenous peoples are affected as they have less control of their land. Peru over time has become more neoliberal and focuses on food security from global food markets instead of highlighting indigenous foods, which are sacred to them. This idea promotes how capitalistic societies highlight the importance of food security and providing people with meals, but it still diminishes the importance of local food, which is important to indigenous peoples not only as a source of nutrients, but also as the direct connection, which is divided when they consume food that is not connected to their regular diets. Furthermore, the National Agrarian Confederation calls for the recovery of ancestral agricultural practices, land security, and access to commercialized channels for indigenous peoples so that they can truly attain food sovereignty instead of just food security. My last article highlights how the biodiverse diet of indigenous peoples helps fight against malnutrition, as even when indigenous groups face hardships like climate change disasters, which do come as a result of industrialization, their natural foods and their ways of getting through natural disasters prove the resilience of the local indigenous populations and how sustainable their food systems are. Furthermore, their nutrient-rich foods, which don't favor Western GMOs, and their overall more biodiverse food palette can help fight against malnutrition as seen with lower rates of anemia as compared to Western populations. Lastly, I wanted to connect the ways which having both interconnected food cultures beyond indigenous groups can help non-indigenous peoples around the world, as by growing our own foods, sharing with our community, and connecting ourselves with our lands, we can create healthier mindsets and bodies for ourselves through following indigenous footsteps. And I'm going to play this clip here.
Acá en el Valle Sagrado, recogiendo algunas plantas aromáticas para hacer el almuerzo de hoy. El almuerzo de hoy es pachamanca con cuy al palo.
So pachamanca, it's this ancient Incan technique of cooking where after they forage for all their ingredients, they heat up these rocks and then they put it inside the ground and then they put the ingredients on top of the hot rocks and then they cover it up, essentially creating a convection oven. It was so fun doing that entire process, first foraging in their organic farm and then preparing the proteins by butchering. It was just such a cyclical moment. It just made me think how much I want people in the States to have that kind of connection with their food. So that was a very special moment for me.
The thing about regenerative farming is this is the way it was always done. It's the way my granddad did it. We had 2 cows, 2 pigs, and rice paddies, and they all sort of worked together. I think we've gotten so far away from that, and I think in the process, we've not supported our farmers. I take it really personally and really deeply that we need to fight for farmers to be able to do the things that they actually want to do, that they learned from their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. It's in their blood. In tasting everything that we tasted, whether it was the cacao or the salt or the chilies or the vegetables, everything tasted like I was tasting in Technicolor. And I think that's because there was no middleman there. It was from the farmer onto my plate, into my mouth.
And so I think this video clip highlights the ways which indigenous communities forage, hunt, and cook their foods in a ways that displays the connection and understanding of both the land and the animals, and how this helps create rich and flavorful food. And I think it's a great example of how even in Western societies, where we often deal with prepackaged meals and processed foods, there still are small ways which we can pay homage to indigenous ways of life, whether it be through foraging, cooking, or agriculture, and how this can help create tight-knit communities and connect us with each other as well. And here's my bibliography. And thank you.